Cameras on, that would be great. I'd love to see people, but I understand if not, all good. Okay, we are recording. We are getting started. Leslie's really enjoying her dinner. She's over there dancing. I love it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can just jump right into it. Okay, let me get some stuff kind of moved around. So yeah, so like Jennifer said, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, this is meant to be interactive. So feel free to post a question in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself, right? And just jump into the conversation. So definitely feel free to do that. All right, so tonight we're here to talk about culturally responsive pedagogy and grading equity. So to start with the grant, just to build our foundation, because I know some people are here who just got a message and said, oh, okay, I'm kind of interested in this. And some people are more familiar, but just so that we're all on the same page. Oh, let me change one more thing about my setup. Okay. Okay. So the Culturally Relevant Pedagogy Practices Grant has a very specific goal in mind. And the goal is to increase student success rates for Black students taking online classes. So I know there have been tons and tons of equity efforts over the years. What I like about this, and I think makes it different, is that the goal is super specific, right? We usually just talk about student equity in kind of like a broad sense that we want to achieve it. But I think that this gives us a better chance of actually moving that needle when we're much more focused, right, on what our goal is. So what's driving us is this theory of change, right? So when we wrote the grant, and a lot of people had a hand in it, we basically made the argument that if we provide faculty with the tools to examine their own online success rate data for Black students and offer targeted professional learning while systematically provoking a division by division cultural shift towards better supporting Black students, if we can do all that, and I know that we can improve the success rates of Black students across campus, right? So that's kind of the argument, right, and the philosophy behind the grant. Now, I know that we have some new folks here, some people who are interested in participating in the grant as a faculty participant. And so I'm sure you're curious, what does that mean? What does that look like? So I've come up with a step-by-step guide to go over that with you. So step one, if you choose to participate in the grant as a faculty participant, is you are going to explore equity data for Black students in online classes in your division and then in at least one of your own classes. And so you are going to be able to access your own equity data. Nobody else is going to see that data, right? Because that's sensitive information. But you're going to make a request with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and our tour is going to send you your own equity data for your courses. Step two is to explore and identify at least one culturally relevant or equity-minded practice to address the equity gaps that you see, right? So you're going to analyze, right, what are the gaps, and then come up with at least one strategy, right? Explore what are the strategies that I could use, right, to impact the gaps that I'm seeing, specifically, again, for Black students in online classes. Step three, you're going to complete an implementation plan. And that implementation plan is basically just forcing you to document step one and step two. What does your equity data look like? And then what is the strategy that you're going to implement to address that gap? That implementation plan is due by February 1st, which is right before spring semester begins, right? So you'll have some time to think about it, think about the data, think about the strategies. Maybe you use one of the strategies we talk about today. and then come up with your plan. Step 4 is to actually implement the plan, right? Implement your practice in the spring 2024 semester. We're going to offer some optional CRPP trainings. Our faculty success coaches, those are the people that are assigned to the particular divisions to work with them on a division by division basis. They're required to attend those trainings, but they're also open to the faculty participants, just like this one tonight. And then step 5 is complete the implementation assessment at the conclusion of the semester. So you're going to revisit your equity data and evaluate the implementation process and the outcome. Do you see a difference? Did it move the needle, right? And this is due by June 17th, which is after spring semester ends. And the thing to note about all of these steps is that your faculty success coach is a resource for you to use in each one of these steps. So every division has been assigned a faculty success coach. If you choose to participate, we'll let you know exactly who that person is, and they'll be your direct contact in terms of the grant, folks that the person that you can work with and use as a resource. But of course, Jennifer and I are here as well. I see the chat is popping off a little bit. I just see the red number going up. Anything in there, Jennifer, that we should address?
No, I got you. When I see something, I'll make sure to include it.
Hey, that's my partner right there. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, teamwork. All right, so the grant is called Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. What does that even mean? Okay, so this was a term that was coined by Gloria Ladson Billings way back in '94, golden era of hip hop. My golden era, the best R&B music comes from the early '90s. And she defined it as a pedagogy of opposition specifically committed to collective, not merely individual empowerment, right? So the way that many people set up their classes is we throw the assignments up there, we have our policies, and we just look to see which individuals, right, are able to be successful based on how we've structured our class. But we want to think about approaching our classes from a collective perspective, right? Who are the groups that need our support? Who are the groups that need us to reach out to them and reach to them more so than others? So we want to have a collective approach to the class and not just think of our students as these individuals, and whoever can, do all the things that we've asked, right, are successful. So culturally relevant pedagogy are teaching practices, right, that are validating and affirming for our students, that are empowering, emancipatory, and transformative, and that are multidimensional and inclusive, right? So we want to make sure that our students are feeling validated, seen, heard, represented, affirmed, right, in who they are in our courses. We want to make sure our students are empowered, right? That they have an emancipatory experience and a transformative experience. The traditional way of setting up our courses is not empowering to students, right? It's not emancipatory, it's not transformative. It's doing things in the same old way that they've always been done. And so we really want to transform the way that we approach our courses. And again, we're thinking about how can we do this in a way that will benefit Black students in our online classes specifically. We also want the strategies to be multi-dimensional, right? Things here and there, our assignments, our late policies, our grading policies, right? We want it to be culturally relevant in multiple ways, and we also want it to be inclusive. I also have to quickly shout out Jennifer because she is the Canva queen. And she got me on to using Canva. And I don't know, y'all, it's kind of fly. I don't know, this presentation is kind of doing it for me. I usually use Keynote or PowerPoint, but I'm feeling this. Okay, thank you for the hand claps and stuff. I appreciate that. All right, so that's what culturally relevant pedagogy is. And that's kind of the umbrella under which right? We're thinking about the strategies, right, that we want to implement in our courses to try to have that positive impact on the equity gaps that we see. So that's the big umbrella, right? A specific strategy that we can use is what we're going to continue with now. So we're going to talk about the strategy of grading for equity or grading equity. So this is a book that I pretty much got everything that I'm going to share with you from. This is the main resource. It's called Grading for Equity, what it is, why it matters, and how it can transform schools and classrooms. So I highly recommend it if it's something that perks your interest and you want to delve even deeper. I'm definitely giving you enough tonight to implement the strategies, but if you want to get more into the history of education, why is it that we have the grading policies that we do? How can we make them more transformative? It's a great book and it's not super thick. All right, so grading equity. Let's start with the equity part. What does it mean to be equity minded? And then we'll kind of link that up with grading. So being equity minded means that we actively seek and respond to inequities in student outcomes, right? And we're doing this with the grant. We're having you look at your data, right? We're presenting divisions with their equity data as it relates to Black students in online classes. And then we're asking the faculty participants to take an even deeper dive to look at their own equity data for their particular classes. So we are absolutely doing that, right? Seek those inequities, right, that we need to address. The next part takes a little bit of humble pie, okay? We need to recognize that the inequities that we see reflect shortcomings of us, right, as instructors, of our institution, and reflect things outside of our control, right? Larger societal issues, right? Marginalization and oppression, right? That all of these things meld together, right, to help us understand why we see the equity gaps that we see. Why are Black students in online classes not as successful as other students? It's not the students, right? It's us. It's the way our institutions are set up, right? And it's the larger issues of racism, right? That our students have had to contend with and show up, right? And how they're able to show up in our classes. Being equity minded also means that we're going to do something about it, right? We're going to employ strategies to target and close the equity gaps. And that's what we're asking you to do, right? Look at your gaps. What are they? What are you going to do to address them? Implement them. Let's see if anything happened, right? So we're taking an equity minded approach, right? And how we're looking at things with the grant. So if we think about grading equity, right, grading for equity, this refers to practices that, quote, create more accuracy in grades, right? Like, what are we actually grading? What are we trying to assess? And are we assessing it, right, with the traditional policies, right, that many of us have in place, right? So it creates more accuracy in grades. Grading equity is more bias resistant, okay? And these are policies that are more motivational for our students, okay? So that's what grading, the approach, right, of grading for equity is. All right, let me stop here because I've just been hearing myself talk too much. And let me open it up just to any questions about culturally relevant pedagogy, grading equity, even faculty participant stuff. Any questions, any clarifications needed for anything thus far?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, thank you for this. I'm learning and exploring a lot here. I'm curious, personal responsibility in regards to the students who are not doing their work or turning things in or just not engaging at all? How is that? I see you're reflecting it to institutions and larger societal things, but
Mhm.
is personal responsibility any bullet point in any of this at all?
No, in short, right? When we're thinking about this from an equity-minded perspective, we're not arguing that personal responsibility plays no role, right? We're just saying, where is our responsibility? What can we do, right, to close the equity gaps, right? Can we do everything? Can we usher a student, to the computer and press the buttons for them? Absolutely not, right? There is a major role, the central role that they play. But when we're using an equity-minded approach, what we're focused on doesn't mean personal responsibility doesn't matter, but what we're focused on are what are the things that we can do as instructors and as an institution to close those equity gaps, right? If students are disinterested or not turning things in on time or are not successful, what is it that we can do to change that? Can we do everything? No, right? But there's a lot that we can do, right, to try to address those gaps that goes beyond just the personal responsibility.
And I think, during our kickoff event, we had a Black student panel who have taken online courses, not just at West LA, but in our district. And a lot of these topics came up where our students recognize that they play an important role on whether or not they are successful in our classes. Nowhere in the panel did they say, that they didn't have any responsibility, or there wasn't an acknowledgement that sometimes there is a lack of motivation. And I kept hearing students say, like, I know we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And one thing that I learned from listening to them and thinking about this, grading equity in today's training, and how grading, the history of grading and the way that grading has been practiced traditionally, is just kind of listening to students and realizing that a lot of what they're asking for is empathy. And so when I think about grading equity, I'm not thinking about like, okay, well, this is what students need to do. I'm thinking about how can I express more empathy in my grading practices. And luckily, I know sometimes empathy can be subjective, and it can be a bit abstract, right, in the way that we communicate empathy. But the purpose of this training is to give you some tangible practices and examples on how you can communicate that empathy that students also echoed during our student panel. And I'll make sure to find the link and copy paste it on the chat.
Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Jan Vanderpool, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, and thank you for this training. What I've noticed in the 4.5 decades that I've been teaching here is that students are coming in less prepared, significantly less prepared, and much of the early part of the class tends to be remedial work, basic arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, how would this, the equity, training make up for these deficiencies, these fundamental or foundational deficiencies that students are coming with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, that kind of gets to the point that, these are issues that sometimes we're dealing with, issues that are beyond us, right? Like the students are already coming to us, right? Not adequately prepared to take the courses, right, that we're offering. And so we're going to get into some specific strategies. So I'm just going to ask, maybe we can hold that thought. And once we get into the specific strategies, maybe we can come back to that, and you can share if you feel like these are things that would be helpful in your class in terms of creating a more equitable environment and hopefully minimizing those gaps. So can we do that?
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into the specifics, right? So this is just generally, right? being equity-minded, grading for equity, right? What does that look like? Now let's look at some of the specific examples of what it means to grade for equity. And I want to ask you to really put yourself in a space of, like, I want a transformational experience for students in my classes, right? I want that needle to move, right? I really want to see a significant increase in the success rate of the Black students in my classes. And what that means is that you probably have to step outside of what you've always been doing, right? And stepping outside of what we're comfortable with and what we're used to, what we were taught, it can be challenging, right? And it can be possibly intimidating, right? So really try to put yourself in that space of, I really want a transformational experience for the students, right? And what does that look like? And what does that require of me? And how might that challenge me? And am I willing to take on that challenge, okay? Because I know some of these things are very different than what most of us do. So just try to be in that kind of open space as we're going through this. Okay, so here we go. So the first strategy that we're going to look at, and we're just going to cover the strategies, and then we're actually going to do a group exercise where each group is going to take one strategy and kind of do some deeper analysis of it. And I also want to just say off top that these are all strategies that I do use. So I have personal experience if anybody wants to ask about that. And I know there's other people in here that use some of these strategies as well. So the first one is to accept late work, okay? And accept late work without penalty or the need for students to ask for permission. Okay, don't everybody leave at the same time. Okay, stick with me, okay? So the idea behind this is Black students are more likely to experience marginalization, which can present barriers to getting work in on time, right? They might have to work more, right? They might be dealing with health issues, familial obligations, right? And it might also present itself as a barrier to even asking for an extension, right? Black students experience something called stereotype threat, right? So the idea is Black students know that there's a stereotype of them, and the threat of even possibly doing something that reflects that stereotype can cause a lot of anxiety and can cause them to not perform as well, right, in the classroom. We know that students of color, Black students as well, experience imposter syndrome. I experience imposter syndrome, right? Just this feeling of, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, right? And all of these things can present themselves as barriers, right, to the student even asking for permission for an extension. The next strategy is to only require free materials for your course, right? Now, if I had said this even 10 years ago, I know that it would have been a real struggle, right, for people to use free materials. But there's been a huge shift, right, in the what are called open educational resources that are available to faculty to use with students, especially when it comes to lower division courses, which are the courses that we offer at community college. So I'm not saying it's easy for every single discipline, but I know that it is much easier today than it was even, again, just 5 years ago to find and use free course materials for your courses. So Black students are more likely to be lower income, and the cost of the material can be a barrier. The next strategy is allowing open note and open book exams. So textbooks and notes are resources and should be treated as such. Requiring memorization of materials isn't necessarily an accurate measurement of their understanding of the material. Remember, we want the grades to also be accurate, right? And allowing students to use them can also reduce test anxiety. So if a student is experiencing test anxiety, then we're not getting an accurate sense of whether or not they understand the material, because the anxiety is going to impact their performance. Okay.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please.
I mean, and I think this is a statement that is applicable to all of us as instructors, because we have so much power in our classes. Like, if we think about ourselves, like, one thing that helps me, that kind of reminds me, is that I am a gatekeeper. So depending on how I show up in the classroom and how I address my own biases, or how I decide to address and acknowledge my racial equity gaps, can determine whether or not a student, proceeds in their academic, journey and career. But one thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of accept late work, I don't require students to like open their wound to me. Like, I think it's really important for us to understand, and I'm speaking as a non-Black faculty member, I think it's really important for us to be conscious that, asking or expecting a student to explain what traumatic experience prevented them from turning in a paper, I think it's not the way to go. So I just want us to keep that in mind, how stereotype threat, how just even a student might, being a little intimidated by acknowledging that, they were supposed to do something and they didn't do it by the deadline, just being very mindful of how a student might feel if you're asking for a detailed explanation as to why they didn't turn in their, an assignment, or why they didn't meet a deadline. And I think it's really important that we keep that in mind when students approach us and they're asking for grace.
Thank you for that. Okay. 2 more strategies and then we'll chat about it. So allowing multiple attempts at exams and assignments. Black students are more likely to attend poorly funded schools that do not adequately prepare them for college. Giving students the opportunity to try again with your feedback motivates them to do better and earn as many points as possible. It can also reduce the initial stress in turning in an assignment, since they know that they can try again. Okay, I know I have stuff that I turn in and I get wrong all the time. It gets sent back to me and I'm given the opportunity to do it again, right? Right here at West LA College. So, allowing students, right, giving them that opportunity. And this is students working. This is students showing personal responsibility, right? You're saying you got to do the work again, right? So they're earning it, right? But giving them that opportunity with feedback, right? That's another strategy for grading for equity. The last one is the one that tends to be the little more controversial one when I've done this before, and that is assigning a 50% for missing assignments instead of assigning a 0. Okay, don't leave. Ain't nobody left, right? Okay, don't leave. So what's the idea behind this? So earning a 50% is still a failing grade, right? If the student doesn't turn anything in all semester, what are they going to get? An F, right? If you get the book Grading Equity, he does this really interesting discussion where he talks about, like, why is it that an A is a 90 to 100, a B is an 80 to an 89, right? It's these short little, pieces on the scale, right? But then failing is a 0 to a 59. Right? Like, why is there a greater opportunity, right, for you to fail? Why is the grade scale made drastically more of failing, right? So the idea is that earning a 50% is still a failing grade. Assigning a 50% instead of a 0% reduces the impact on the overall grade. It is still going to have a negative impact, right? But it reduces the impact, and this can keep students motivated. Again, remember, grading equity is all about motivating students, right, to do well. They are more likely to keep trying if they feel like there is a chance that they can still pass the class, right? If they don't turn something in and it's a 0, it's kind of like, oh, well, it's a 0, right? I won't be able to make that up, right? It puts me in too big of a hole, right? Assigning a 50% is still that failing grade, right? But it can give students the opportunity or the sense that I can still pass this class. And what I have found is that when I combine assigning a 50% with the late work thing, like allowing them to do late work, I don't even end up having a lot of missing assignments. Of course, I still do have some, but the number of missing assignments has been reduced really dramatically because students are able to turn in work late. And again, they have multiple attempts, right? They can get the score that they want with my feedback. And so putting these things together, I have really seen a very dramatic difference in the success rate, specifically for students of color in my class. And I've been implementing these strategies since I started with a little trickle in the fall of 2020, and eventually added more as I went along. Bill, did you have your hand up? No. No, sorry about that. You just popped up for me. Oh, okay.
I have my hand up.
Okay, let me come back to Dr. Jan Vanderpool because I said I was going to come back and then we'll get to you next.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. So anything here that you see could be beneficial in the scenario that you were presenting?
Yeah, I like the 50% strategy. I hadn't thought about that, but it makes a lot of sense that the target for failure is so much greater than the target for success. I like that. That's something that I'll probably implement.
Awesome.
The multiple attempts, since I teach a math class, I would actually have to give different problems, and that would be somewhat problematic, but it's an open book. And I emphasize to students at the very beginning and continuing throughout the class that even though it's an open book, doesn't mean it's easy.
Right.
You still have to do the work in order to be successful. I do have timed exams. I let folks know that you can't just do this and think that you're going to be able to page through the textbook and find the answer. If you haven't read it, if you haven't gone through it before, it's going to still be tough to pass.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I do is I provide extra credit by attending office hours. So I have weekly office hours on camera, and I encourage the students to attend that. We try to build a collective of learning in this, and I give extra credit for attendance. That's it.
All right. And, I know you mentioned the allowing multiple attempts that would make it so that you would have to create new problems, right? One, I think you could have the same problems, right? If they didn't get it before and they're able to demonstrate at another time after they get the feedback that they're able to get it. But, also just like with a lot of our exams, once we have it done, we usually don't have to keep going over and over again. And so, maybe in the first semester, if you allow multiple attempts, you'd be creating, right, those different versions that you feel like you need to have. But then you would have those different versions, right, in future semesters. So it would be more work up front, right? But then you'd have those to be able to offer. Who was it that also wanted to participate? Thank you, Dr. Vanderpool. Wanted to comment. The way I have my screen set up, I wasn't able to see
It's
that.
me, Marcia.
Marcia, go ahead.
I teach first-time college students from high school. They're still in high school. I don't get to see their faces. I don't know their culture. I just have names.
Yeah.
And I get assignments. Once in a while, I'll see a kid that comes into my office hours. I really like the idea of credit for office hours. I'm going to implement that because I really need more than one time a week to talk to these kids. I do a lot of, the class I teach requires writing. They have to know how to write a letter. They have to know how to do a resume. They have to show proficiency in that. I do drafting before. I give some points for that. And I also give them hints about how they can make it better and give them examples. I mean, I almost do the work for them.
Mm-hmm.
I also give them multiple attempts at quizzes
Mm-hmm.
and open book, always,
Mhm.
because they're going to do it anyway online. Give me a
Hello.
break. Let's make it easy, right?
Right.
Let's be truthful.
Right.
I know you want to know this stuff. I
Right.
give them a PDF and a video of the chapter. So if they aren't good at reading and understanding, I explain it. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm having an issue this semester only. Half of my class is not submitting assignments. Half of them are straight A's.
Mhm.
I'm meeting with them tonight. In a
Mhm.
few minutes, I have to leave.
Mhm.
I'm beyond myself.
Mhm.
I've been doing this since 2017 online.
Mhm.
This is the worst year. These kids are AP students. I'm
Mhm.
beside myself. I've tried everything I can. I'm going to cry.
Mhm. Yeah, because we care. We care.
I really care because I've explained to them a fail on a college course is so much harder to get rid of than in high school.
Mhm.
Please, please. I sent them individual letters
Yeah. Well,
in Canvas.
let me say this. If with all the things that you're doing, which sound amazing, all the opportunities that you're giving them, if you look at your equity data, right, which is if you're a faculty participant, that's what we're asking you to do. Look at your equity data for Black students in your online classes. And if you see gaps, we are challenging you, pushing you to say, you got to do more. You're doing a lot. It's not to say you're not doing a lot, but if you still see those gaps, there's something still missing, right? There's something more, right, that can be done. And it's not to negate what you are doing or saying you're
Right.
trying. You absolutely are. And you obviously really care. But we have to just take that real hard look and say, okay, these are the things that in my head I thought would make a difference. But if I see the gap still there, then there is still work to be done. I also want to really quickly just make a point about extra point for office hours. Students are not required to go to office hours.
Right.
So some students are more able to than others, right? People
Right.
with kids, people with jobs, people with a million things kind of going on, people who are scared to go see their instructor because they've had such a traumatic experience in the school system. They're less likely to come. And so we don't want to penalize those students. So make sure that you also have extra credit opportunities that don't require a time and place so that it's not only benefiting students who do have the time to come to office hours. So just make sure you have other options as well. All right, so I hear you. And hopefully, some of these strategies might be some things that you might employ and could possibly make a difference. So I really hope that you participate, look at your data, right? And then get into some nitty-gritties with strategies and see if we can move that needle. Also, just keep in mind that these are kids coming out of COVID, right? And there's all kinds of research being done. We're still in it, right? About the mental health issues and just what young people kind of experienced through quarantine, right? I mean, these are high school students, so they were, 3-4 years ago, even younger, right? In a very important developmental stage and had to go through the collective traumatic experience. So again, thinking about the fact that sometimes these are things outside of our control, but they're there. And so, we have to deal with, right, the students that we are given. Okay, so I want to do a real quick exercise, okay? And what I'm going to do is we're going to break y'all up into 5 different groups. Each group is going to be given a strategy to talk about, think about a little bit further. And we're going to have specific questions for you to answer about the strategy that you were assigned. So Jennifer, my lovely co-lead, if you could break up everyone into 5 different groups. And then once you're in your groups, we're going to post the questions and the strategy that you're going to answer the questions about. Any questions before we get into these groups? Awesome. Okay. And then we're going to give you, I know it's not a lot of time, but we're going to give you 10 minutes, okay, to chat and discuss in your groups and answer the questions. And then we'll come back and hear what people came up with. So Jennifer, if you could get folks broken up into 5 different groups.
So, so I'm not sure if it's because of the share. Oh yeah, the share.
Oh, do I need to do it?
Yeah, it's like yeah.
Okay.
So while Tiffany is doing this, I just wanted to also mention that as a faculty participant, you know, the task isn't for you to reinvent your whole class. What I'm doing in my class is I'm looking at a high stakes assignment. So for example, the final, I've noticed that in my data, students will stay in my class because they want to keep trying. Like they'll keep coming, even though they may not turn in all of the assignments, or even if they might be a little bit more absent than other students, but they'll keep trying, they'll keep coming. And then I noticed that they kind of tap out towards the end of the semester. So what I did is I implemented one new strategy based on my data and looking at my equity gap, which is, and I know that this is subject specific, but an idea. We start working on our final 4 weeks before the final is due. So I am doing regular check-ins. I am having office hours with them. I'm giving them, you know, submitted, not submitted little tasks to keep them on track and to make sure that they stay on schedule. So my data for last spring, that was the first time I did that, looked really good. I'll be interested to see what it looks like this semester that I did that. I did the similar practice for several of my classes. So again, remember, we're not expecting you to reimagine or redesign your whole course, but one technique would be to take a look at your data, see where you're losing your students, and figure out how you can make one high stake assignment an equity-minded, implement an equity-minded grading strategy to help our students pass the class.
Yeah, excellent point, right? You hear all this stuff and it's like, oh my God, am I supposed to do all this at once? No, right? We're going to encourage you to do like 1 or 2 things. Pick 1 or 2 things, right? In one of your classes, right? That you want to implement for the spring. Because we don't want you to get overwhelmed. We don't want you to feel like this is unachievable or impossible, right? We want to make it doable, right? Most of us have plans for doing this for, you know, a few more years, right? So we've got time, right, to ease into it. All right, so I'm making the groups. You'll see a little tab that's going to ask you to join a group. Please do. And then once everyone's in their group, we're going to put in the questions and your particular grading equity strategy. Are y'all seeing it?
Yes, I see mine.
Okay, they're getting in there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see them.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you're good with putting the thing in each group?
I don't have access to it. I'm
Oh.
looking at your screen as a participant. Yeah.
Right, I just forgot. I forgot
Yeah.
that. Okay, let me, how do I get out of here? I don't know how to get out. Oh, stop share. How about that?
Yeah.
Here I go. All right. Copy. All right, let me see. How do I get to the groups? Breakout rooms. Okay. All right.
So you get used to it. You sort of like, oh, okay, I know what noises are coming out of that bush now.
Yeah. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Good. I heard it's great. Let's see. We are supposed to talk about one strategy.
Yeah, she's gonna be sending us our question, but I actually have it in front of me too. So let me share it with us, share it with y'all. Let me see. Can I do it over chat?
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask Sandra a question that has nothing to do with this.
Hmm.
Sandra, does anybody have any like food allergies? I'm just kidding.
Oh, I think Claire's daughter is allergic to nuts
Oh, okay, good.
or peanuts. I think she has like a nut allergy. Yeah.
Okay,
Melanie, I think, has nut allergy. Yeah.
yeah. What is the do you know like more or less how many people are gonna show up?
I'm gonna send out a reminder. My child. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa? ¿Ya no más? Okay. ¿O quieres más? Okay. And I don't know. I'm gonna send out a reminder email tonight or tomorrow morning, and then maybe tomorrow we'll have a better count of how many people are going to go. And I know that Claire invited some folks that are no longer like at West, like Walter. Do you remember Walter Jones?
Yeah, Walter.
And like Fran, and so they might come by too.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna share the example that she wanted us to think about. So she says, think about the possibility of implementing one of these strategies in your course. What are the pros and cons and considerations? So the idea of assigning a 50% for missing assignments instead of a 0. You know, the argument that she's making is that assigning 50% instead of a 0 reduces the impact on an overall grade, which can keep students motivated. They are more likely to keep trying if they feel like they can still pass the class.
I'm gonna this is the one that I'm most leaning towards trying. And
Same.
so I'm excited to figure out how that's gonna look like. Especially when I heard Tiffany talk about like how the book, you know, questions how the scale of grading is already inequitable. Like I never even thought about that. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, how can we not have thought about that? 50% is already like a big chunk of the failure. That's why, like I wrote in the chat, it's American exceptionalism. We're so like used to culturally being always exceptional that like failure is never considered as part of the experience. But how is failure structured is a question that I'm always thinking about too. So to me, I'm definitely going to lean towards 50% for missing assignments starting in the spring. I just need to figure out like what that's going to look like and maybe change some assignments for my students. But I'm excited to try it because I think it's going to address some things that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah.
And this is
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
Is this like assigning 50% for some assignments or for all assignments?
I think that's going to be up to you,
thing.
right? Like, I think it's going to be up to, so an example of this would be, for my first assignment in the semester, it's a complete or incomplete. So, you know what I mean? You know, because usually, you know, a lot of our students sometimes have taken an online class for the first time. Do you know what I mean? And they don't know where they're supposed to go. Sometimes they forget that the class started on Monday. They don't log on until Wednesday. You know what I mean? So you know, for that first assignment, I won't do a grade. I'll just do complete or incomplete. So, you know, once they get that notification that the assignment is incomplete, it still gives them that option to jump in and finish it, you know? And then I think also in the first essay, the semester, I think that, you know, if students are getting zeros very early on, it can be a little demoralizing. And we already know that there are so many other circumstances, you know, like stereotype threat. There's the power dynamics in a classroom between instructor and student. There is, anti-Blackness. So all of those things I think can be demoralizing for a student to open up the grade book and see a 0. And of course, this isn't taking away from the fact that maybe the assignment wasn't turned in, right? It's empty. There's nothing there. But still, like, if what we're trying to do is retain, right, to keep our students in class and to keep them engaged and motivated, that's something I've started to do with the first essay. When students don't turn it in, I just give them a 50%. I send them that message that I know that in the English department we talk about, and language arts, we talk about this a lot, right? The message of,
Right.
hey, how are you doing? I noticed that you haven't turned in the first paper. Please reach out if you need any help, or, when will you be able to turn it in? So not only are they not getting a 0, they're getting something, and they're getting that encouraging message. And I think that's really helped me keep the students with me, even when they don't start off on, with their best, at the beginning of the semester.
Okay.
Jennifer, when you give complete incomplete assignments, if a student doesn't submit it and receives an incomplete, do they still get the 50% points or the 50% grade? Or does it just remain as like complete?
It's just
incomplete?
complete incomplete. I don't, for the first one, the first assignment, I just don't want them to, I don't, I get so many students that are like, oh, English wasn't my best subject. I've always been bad at English, so I just try not to assign any numbers, you know what I mean, for that first assignment, until I can kind of soothe them into, through the trauma around around language skills, reading and writing, because usually that's what it is. Some traumatic experience happened to them with like a racist teacher or some terrible experience, and then they come into your class and then they're like, this thing is going to happen again. And so one of the things, that stereotype threat that Tiffany mentioned earlier in the presentation, is that what the data showed is that when students feel a stereotype threat, they would rather just give up than to prove the stereotype right. So when I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, so if they would rather just give up than to prove the stereotype right, then what can I remove, right, in the process or of the experience that's not going to make them feel like I'm going to judge their character or their abilities, rather than like, oh, I just didn't get to it. Let me get to it,
Yeah, which is part of the case.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I actually had a quick question. I appreciate all these options of what we have. I'm excited to try the majority of them. I actually have a majority of them already implemented, but the 50% for missing assignments I have not. So I'm excited to do that because I feel the same way as you all are just kind of saying. I did have like an additional question according to like the participant role. Does this only include online classes, or do hybrid classes are an option too?
Tiffany and I are making the argument that hybrid classes are definitely an option, because we have counseling courses, and counseling is so critical to the work. I mean, counseling, they're the face of our campus, you know what I mean, our counselors. So we were talking to the chair of counseling, and she explained to us that right now there are only hybrid classes, and so we are asking, that folks with hybrid classes participate. And what's going to happen is that we'll be able to collect the data in a separate way to basically say, like, this class wasn't 100% online, but it had an online component. So yes, I think this can apply to I'm sorry, that was a long-winded response.
No, it's all good.
To an online class. I just wanted to give you the background of an example that we just dealt with like earlier today.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you say that because I'm actually the counselor who's teaching that hybrid class.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
great. Yeah. I mean, you guys are so important, it's like you're the face of our institution. You guys are the first people that our students get to see. So it, you know, collecting that data from you all is going to be very, very important.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, she's giving us a minute to wrap up. Yeah, so I think another thing that's helped with the grading equity is just kind of looking at my grade book as well, right? Like taking a look at, okay, what are the high stakes assignments? Let me pick one. Let me pick one assignment. And for me, last semester, it was the final, because I was like, oh, my students are staying with me, but now they're kind of like, you know, losing steam when it gets to the final. So I've made all of the assignments for the last 4 to 5 weeks of the semester, just focusing on finishing that final. And you know, when the first time I did this last spring, I had one of the highest pass rates I've had in years, So, so then I was like, yes, I figured something out. Now that might not necessarily be the answer to, you know, the following semester. I'm not sure, but again, it's like looking at your data, figuring out like, okay, what can I do different in my grading policy? What kind of changes I can make, and then change that one thing and see if it makes a difference. See if it makes a difference. And we're not asking you to transform your whole course.
Jennifer, I had a question about like your late policy, because I'm completely part of the idea of not requiring students to ask for permission and accepting late assignments without penalty. But I've been struggling and keeping up with like grading assignments. And so I'm trying to figure out what's an equitable balance between the student being able to turn in an assignment late and me being able to like not be overwhelmed
Not
by
cry.
grading. Yeah,
Yeah.
not cry every time. Oh, we're losing
Yeah.
time, but I'm just
We have
wondering if
32
we can
seconds.
talk about that.
Yeah, so just very quickly, I've put a policy on my syllabi, and I also added to my welcome video that, you know, I'm practicing, you know, equity-minded grading. And so, you know, I do give, you know, grace when it comes to turning work in late, but that will not guarantee feedback, that they will have to rely on the grading rubric, because, and I'll explain things like, you know, I'm really busy. I want to give you your points, but I'm really busy. So to meet in the middle, I will grade it. I just can't.
For sure. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, see, everybody got pushed out. I love it. I said the majority of y'all had to be pushed out of your groups. That must mean that it was some good discussion going on, okay?
Very good dialogue.
So really quickly, just because of the time, if I could have just one person from each group, just really quickly, just, you know, say something about what was discussed. Maybe talk about a pro or a con, or is it something that people in the group felt like they could do? Can we start with the first group? And that was for no late penalties, right? Accepting late assignments. Can I have one person from that group really quickly summarize the discussion there?
I'll take it. I think we had a very good group and great dialogue. We had, I think we were for the no late penalties. We had two of the there was two teachers or instructors that allowed late penalties. One did not acknowledge that they allowed late penalties, and the other, which was myself, I think the other was Andrea. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing her name right. That she allowed late work, but she didn't state that she did, and that I stayed up front that I allowed late work with I provide some caveats. Said, okay, you can't wait until the end of the semester to try to get all the work done. And, you know, so that was my main caveat there, because if people work and they have busy schedules, as you kind of open up with your dialogue, that you kind of indicated and highlighted the same things I highlight. Life is busy, things get in the way. So if you can't make it this week, you get it in next week, and there's no penalty. So for me, it's really been working. I think 2/3 of the, and I think I want Andrea to come on and say what she came back with, but 2/3 of my class get their working on time, and 1/3 kind of takes advantage of the no late work. penalty.
Okay. Arnidra, why are you not telling students? Either you doing it or you not doing it.
I don't tell them because I don't want them to turn it in on the last day. Because when I was telling people that they could turn them in, remember we got to write, and we write a lot. Then you turning in 10 writing assignments 2 days after the semester ended. So I just leave it there. So there's no end date on there. If they really look in Canvas, if they were really doing what they were supposed to be doing, they would see that there's no due date on Canvas. But so you can turn it in whenever you want with no penalties. I just don't tell them so that they turn it in. And I always remind them, you got to be to work on time. So just go and turn the work in on time.
I'm usually not at work on time, but yeah. But I think that what Bill said is important, like the little caveat that he has. I think that's something that you could add because you have the policy there because you know you want it to benefit students. So you need to let them know so they can benefit from it. So I think adding that caveat, like Bill said, you know, maybe it's a 2-week window. You know, we're not saying you have to dive head first all the way deep in. Maybe you say, hey, I'll accept it for 2 weeks, right? The caveat I have for late work is they do have to turn in their week 1 assignments because we have to do the no-shows, right? So I say this, you have to turn in. If you don't turn in these week 1s, you're going to get dropped. That's a no-show. And then the end of the semester is the end of the semester. So that's written into the policy so they can see that. So add that caveat. And so more students, you know, can benefit because you put it there because you know students can benefit from it, right? But yeah, totally understand why you don't want to throw it all out there and get a mountain at the end, right? But add that caveat. What was group number 2's strategy?
I think I'll take this. Ours was, it was about only required free materials. Black students are more likely to be lower income and the cost of materials can be a barrier. I think most of us are all in favor, and you know, and Deanna, she talked about some of the opportunities that we have. I like free materials because again, you know, you don't have that student coming up to you at the, you know, at the second week of class saying, I couldn't turn in my homework because I didn't have the book, but I'm going to get paid tomorrow. So can I, you know, you don't have any of that. It's there for the student. As a math professor, you know, most math classes, we use online homework. That's money. And you know, I use an open source math homework system because then again, same thing. I'm not getting that. I'm getting paid in 2 weeks, and so then I can afford. So I think that's helpful. The cons is that all of that stuff, one, you're not necessarily going to find the exact right thing that's for you, or it's not going to be written very well. You know, the homework option, it can be buggy, and you have to, you know, do that yourself, which is a lot of work. But you know, if you want to do right by your students, you just you do it.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that so much. Like, who's gonna argue against free materials, right? But those caveats are there, right? Or those cons and things to consider. And it really put in my mind making sure that I'm connecting this group with the OER materials and resources that are out there, of which there are many, many, many. What about group 3? What was your strategy?
We open book, open notes.
Okay.
And I think we kind of all agree that online students, we assume they're already doing that, using their notes and and whatever book that there is. So we didn't have a problem with that. I guess the pros is that, you know, you have the information there, but as we discussed earlier, I think in the open forum is that, you know, you can't just open the book when it's test time. You kind of have to have some knowledge of the material beforehand. So, yeah, but we're, you know, totally on board with that being a great strategy.
Yeah, and you know, it seems like some people just assume, well, they're just going to use it, so whatever. But I know there are faculty members at West Los Angeles College that use programs to try to ensure that students are not using their notes and their book during an exam. One program was called Proctorio. That actually like takes a video of the student taking the exam. And I think there were some issues with like privacy, right? And like those types of things, right? Like people were like not willing, right, to let go, right? The issue, not let go and let students use materials. And I always say, letting students use resources is more reflective of the actual world, right? Like when in our jobs are we not able to use a resource, right, to do our jobs? It's not even like it's really preparing them for the actual real world. And so I think teaching them how to use resources, right? Like that's a skill. Like you said, if you don't read anything and then you just open the book and think you can do it, you can't, right? So teaching students how to use resources is actually a beneficial skill. What about number 4?
Just very quickly, something specific about Proctorio that Sandra just brought up is that Proctorios have found to have racial bias. Right? So when we think about implementing very specific strategies to ensure that that Black students specifically are succeeding in online courses, these are the types of considerations that we have to take, because a lot of these things that the business as usual mentality can be very hostile to Black students and to their success.
Really good point. Yeah, all this, the AI stuff we're showing it has so much bias, right? Like built into it because it's coming from what we've already created, which is biased, right? So really great point there. What about strategy number 4? What was that one?
It was all expense paid trips, you know.
Right. What was number 4?
No, it was multiple attempts. It was multiple attempts.
Okay.
And I had a chance to be in there with, I have an English professor, communications professor, and accounting, math. And, we all pretty much understand we'd have to change their whole dynamic of, to incorporate that, for, accounting, you need part A to get to part B and C, and kind of like, as we are moving on to part B and C, with the student remember the parts of part A to resubmit and stuff like that. Some challenges, but it's just, some new ideas that would have to be developed. So, starting this conversation as a start, I can let Leslie and the other professors talk and see what they came up with.
I think you covered it, right? Anything else? And I'm gonna wait for my trip too, since you mentioned that. You must be offering that. Okay, so let's get to the one we've all been waiting for. Who had strategy 5? Who had the assigning 50% instead of 0? What was the discussion in that group like? It floored them. They all left. They said, we can't take this.
Oh, we're here. We're all here.
Yeah, anyone?
I feel like everyone was down. Like everybody was like, all right, like this makes perfect sense. Sandra reiterated the point of, how inequitable the way that we think about 0, like the way we assign a failing point, the point system, like just how kind of strange that is.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about, some of the high stake assignments, right? And then doing maybe the 50% like earlier in the semester so that students don't feel demoralized. And there is at least this kind of belief that, okay, so I only got 50% and I didn't turn it in. Let me take another stab at this, or let me stick this out a little longer, because getting a 0 on the first big assignment, like an English essay 1 within the first 4 weeks of the semester, can be very demoralizing. So that was our general conversation. And I think we're all down to implement a strategy, just kind of like looking at our assignments and think about how to be strategic.
Awesome. All right, Deanna, I see your hand up, and then we're going to keep it moving.
Yes, I definitely agree with all of the other strategies. This one I struggle with, because I'm like, you can't go to work and turn in 50% of your work. And so how are we training them to be successful in that way? You can if you don't show up to work, you're not going to get paid half your salary, right? And so I just struggle with how, especially with the new millennials, how we are holding them to accountability and responsibility. Like I would rather, yes, you can turn it in late. Yes, you can make up the assignments, but giving you 50% and you did nothing. Like if you submit something, maybe I would say have a minimum grade of 50%. Like you can't get any less than 50% if you submitted something. But I mean, just not showing up, not doing anything, I don't know.
Yeah, and look,
Millennials are
you have to
sorry.
you make this work for you, right? And I think you're making really good arguments for what reflects like what you're willing to do and what makes sense for you. I always say that like all these grading strategies, I let students know that I'm making a concerted effort to be equity minded in my courses. And I say, I know that most of your courses are not going to be like this. When you transfer to a 4-year, you're probably not going to experience this. And you may not be in a work environment, right, that has the equivalent, right, of this. But I want to nurture and build the confidence and self-esteem and build my students up so much so that when they go out into the world that isn't as accommodating, as empathetic as my course, they're gonna be better able to withstand it because they're going to be more confident people. I went to a HBCU along with Ronnie. Ronnie followed me to Hampton University. And I remember people saying, why would you go to a HBCU? You know, you're going to be around all Black faculty and students and stuff. It's not reflective of the real world. You're going to have to deal with racism. You're going to have to deal with issues around your race. So it's not realistic. But you know what? Going to an HBCU and having that experience, that cultural experience, and having that uplift that I was able to give, and the just how much it shaped me as a person, how confident it made me, how proud it made me, that was much more important and a better tool that I was able to use as I went out into the world and faced racism to this day, right? It built me up so much, right? That I was able to do that. And so that's really the perspective that I take, is that our classes don't have to be reflective of the world and society, because you know what? It sucks. And I don't want my class to suck. I want my class to be a space of safety, of empathy, and I make that clear to students. I know what I'm doing is different, you know? Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, it's a valid, super valid point. But that's the way that I approach it. All right, let's get back into whatever else I had. And we're not going to get to everything because, again, we're going to be respectful of everybody's time. I don't know if you could tell, but I could talk about this all night. I love this stuff. But let's think of, so I shared with you that these are strategies that I use. And so I've been asking students for their feedback about these policies. So I just want to share with you some student testimonials about these grading equity policies. So since fall 2022, I've asked students to provide feedback about the grading policies, specifically for the purpose of sharing it with faculty members who are thinking about employing such strategies. And just as a, side note, I asked them this after their grades are turned in, right? So they know it's not going to be any impact on their grade. So one student said, I would say that access to free course materials was a tremendous help. In terms of no penalties for late materials, I try to stay on top of things and get things done on time, but on a couple of occasions that semester, I was overwhelmed with work and other commitments, and it was extremely helpful to turn the assignments in a couple of days late. This definitely reduced my stress levels. I really benefited from your policies because it created an environment for me to truly learn instead of focusing on getting an assignment done on time. For students like me, students can be anxiety inducing, and these policies made me more at ease and made me feel like I can focus more. I think these policies are very encouraging. And when I have teachers with a similar policy style, I tend to be more engaged in the process. I appreciated you accepting late work. For example, at one point during my 8-week course, my right hand got injured and I had to get a doctor's notes for my online blank class, but I did not have to stress over it in your class. I appreciate not having to worry about the expense or talk about the textbook since I am working part-time in order to focus on my studies. I was also appreciative of your exam policies. Being able to take multiple times and the times you allocated for the exams was more than sufficient. Compared to my online blank class, it was the same class too. This person did not have a good experience in this class they keep comparing to, where each quiz consisted of 25 questions. We only had 20 minutes to complete it and we're only allowed one attempt. Grading 50% instead of 0 was motivating to complete the assignment because it felt like you were telling me that I'm almost halfway there. I benefited a great deal from these policies you implemented. I am so happy you have done this for me and many others. This sentence always like catches me right in the feels. The way my life is set up, it is almost impossible to get things done without great struggle and on time, right? Our students are dealing with a lot, right? And we know that our Black students, right, tend to deal with even more, okay? So they close it up with anything I can do to help push this way of teaching to others, I am in. All right, so as we wrap things up a little bit here, we start to, let me get my thing right. A few do's and don'ts, and these are things that have already kind of come up during our discussion. So just think about trying 1 or 2 strategies in just one course at a time, right? These are all strategies that I employ, but this is something that I worked up to over years, right? Of trying one, figuring it out, then feeling like I could add more, because we don't want you to get overwhelmed, right? We don't want you to try to do too much too quickly. 1 or 2 things in one course for the spring 2024, like that is plenty. We do want you to depend on your support network. Who is that? That's us, right? If you participate in the grant. So depend on your support network for feedback, for encouragement, for advice. We know that it's challenging and can be scary to do new things in a course. Sometimes it's, you do it, you figure out, oh, it didn't work that way. You got to do it another way, right? So it's nice to have a support network of like-minded folks, right? People who are trying to be equity-minded, who are trying to move the needle in the same way. And then lastly, don't be afraid to try something new. If you look at your equity data and your numbers are telling you that you are not reaching Black students, switch it up, right? Switch it up. Don't be scared to do that, right? The numbers don't lie. They can lie, but they probably are not lying, right? There probably are things that you could do to increase the success rate of Black students in your class. And the last thing that I want to say before I just want to open it up to just kind of general thoughts, comments, feelings, is that any strategy that you saw, these are strategies that you're employing in your class that will affect all students, right? These are just some things that we think might especially benefit Black students in your online classes, but we're not asking you to only apply these policies to your Black students, right? We want to see these as classroom policies. And so the thought is that Black students will probably benefit, but guess what? Your other students, right, will probably benefit as well. All right, so I am going to stop sharing.
So just very quickly, just wanted to kind of point out that on the chat, I've posted the link to our the webinar that kicked off the events of this grant, which was our Black student webinar. Our panelists were all enrolled in online classes, both here at, at West, but also around the district. So a lot of the things that Tiffany was talking about in her presentation, students actually refer to in the panel about when professors did these types of interventions or set these types of policies in their classes, they were able to be successful. And I mean, not all the stories are positive, not all the stories are negative, but I think that if you have an hour and 20 minutes to just kind of listen to what students have to say, they will give you ideas as well.
Yeah, so we know that we have some faculty success coaches here who are already a part of the grant. We're hoping that those of you who are interested in joining these efforts as faculty participants, that this makes you like, yeah, for sure, I want to do this, right? For sure, I want to be part of this. And I know you still might have questions, you still might have things you're not quite sure about, but I want to encourage you to really take the leap. One thing that we haven't mentioned is that you will be compensated, right? People who successfully complete the program, come up with a plan, implement the plan, assess it, right? Will be are paid $500 for their efforts, right? Because we know this does take effort and time. So if you are interested in signing up, what I'm going to ask you to do is to email me, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. Oh. Okay, and or Jennifer, you could put your email in the chat as well. Make sure that you email one of us or both of us. Let us know that you're interested in participating in the program as a faculty participant. We'll get you into our CRPP Canvas page, and we'll help support you through the process, link you up with your faculty success coach, and get this thing going. So in the last couple of minutes that are left, any comments, any questions, anything before we get out of here?
I want to say thank you for your work, and it's exciting to do something that is needed. And I think our college can do very powerful things with its students. So, and I think this initiatives like this, I think will accomplish that. So
absolutely. Yes. And please also go back to your divisions. Talk to other faculty, encourage them to participate, encourage them to reach out to us as well. We can send them the recording of this training. We really want to get at least 4 people from each division to participate. So if you don't see anybody else from your division, if you're the only one, I'm looking at you, right? So go back to your division, talk to the folks that you feel like would be interested in participating, and let's get linked up with them and get this thing going. All right, anything else? Thank you for that comment, Dr. Vanderpool. Appreciate that. Appreciate all your time. Major shout out to my co-lead, Jennifer. Major shout out to everybody that stuck through it. And let's wrap this semester up, but don't wrap it up before telling us you're ready to participate, okay? All right, y'all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.